Welcome back to La Coins World. Imagine finding an old Washington quarter in a jar of coins, looking at the date, and suddenly realizing that the coin in your hand could contain real silver. You might think it is just another 25-cent piece, but some older American quarters are completely different from the modern quarters we find today. And that is exactly why you should never ignore a 1967 Washington quarter. Welcome back to Hardest Penny, $1.9 million the channel, where we take a close look at old American coins, their history, their rarity, their condition, and the details that can make an ordinary-looking coin much more interesting. Today, we are focusing on one coin only, the 1967 Washington quarter, and by the end of this video, you will know what makes this quarter special, how to identify it, what its silver content means, what to look for on the coin, and whether your 1967 quarter could be worth more than its original 25-cent face value. 1967 Washington quarter. The first thing you need to know about the 1967 Washington quarter is that it belongs to one of the most interesting periods in American coinage history. During the 1960s, the United States experienced a major shortage of circulating coins. Silver prices were rising, and people were increasingly saving silver coins because their metal value was becoming attractive. In response, the United States changed the composition of the dime and quarter. But here's where things get interesting. A 1967 quarter is not automatically a rare coin simply because it contains silver. Huge numbers of these quarters were produced. The reported total mintage for the 1967 Washington quarter is more than 1.5 billion coins, making it a very common issue in terms of overall production. So if someone tells you that every 1967 quarter is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars just because of the date, you should be very careful. The real value depends on several factors, including silver value, condition, strike quality, errors, varieties, and collector demand. Now let's look closely at the coin itself. On the front, you will see the famous portrait of George Washington facing left. Above his head is the word Liberty. In front of Washington's face is the familiar inscription, "In God We Trust," and at the bottom you will find the date 1967. One detail that surprises many new collectors is the absence of a mint mark. If you look around the area near Washington's neck, you will not find a small d, s, or other letter. That is normal. The 1967 Washington quarter was produced without a mint mark. The United States Mint had temporarily suspended mint marks during this period as part of its effort to discourage coin collecting and hoarding during the coin shortage. So if you find a 1967 quarter with no mint mark, don't assume that something is missing. The absence of the mint mark is exactly what you should expect on an authentic 1967 quarter. Now turn the coin over. The reverse shows a large American eagle with its wings spread. Around the eagle are the words United States of America and E pluribus unum, while quarter dollar appears at the bottom. The design was created by John Flanagan and had already become one of the most recognizable designs in American coinage. The 1967 quarter is especially interesting because it represents the final years of this early Washington quarter era before later changes in the series. Now let's talk about the most important feature, the silver. A 1967 Washington quarter has a total weight of approximately 6.25 grams and is composed of 40% silver and 60% copper. Because of its silver content, the coin has a melt value that is linked to the current price of silver. But don't make the mistake of assuming that the coin's value is simply equal to its silver content. Collectors may pay more for coins with attractive surfaces, strong strikes, high grades, or unusual mint errors. And that brings us to condition. Imagine two 1967 quarters sitting next to each other. One has been circulating for decades. Its surface is scratched, Washington's hair is worn, the eagle's feathers are soft, and the original shine has disappeared. The other coin looks almost untouched. It has bright original luster, sharp details, clean fields, and very few contact marks. They have the same basic composition, but they may not have the same collector value. This is one of the most important lessons in coin collecting. The condition of a coin can dramatically change its desirability. When examining your 1967 quarter, start with Washington's cheek and jaw. These high points can pick up contact marks very easily. Look at the fields around Washington's portrait and inspect the surface under a good light. You're looking for scratches, dents, discoloration, and signs of cleaning. Then examine the reverse. Pay close attention to the eagle's feathers, the lettering, and the open areas around the design. A well-struck coin with strong detail and attractive original surfaces can be much more appealing than a heavily worn example. And whatever you do, don't clean the coin. Now, let's talk about errors. Because more than 1 billion 1967 quarters were produced, there are plenty of coins that have been examined by collectors over the years. Genuine mint errors can be valuable, but you need to distinguish a true mint error from damage that occurred after the coin left the mint. Look for major abnormalities such as significant off-center strikes, unusual missing design elements, dramatic die breaks, clipped planchets, or other characteristics that clearly originated during the minting process. However, be cautious with supposed double dies. A lot of coins shown online as rare double dies are actually examples of machine doubling, die deterioration, or simple damage. A genuine collectible variety needs to be properly identified rather than judged simply by looking at a blurry photograph. Another interesting area is the edge. Because the 1967 quarter is silver-clad rather than the modern copper-nickel clad type, the edge can provide useful clues about composition. But don't rely only on color. Coins can become discolored from age, chemicals, environmental exposure, or cleaning. If you want to verify a suspected silver quarter, use appropriate numismatic testing methods rather than relying on appearance alone. A professional coin dealer or grading service can help if you believe your example is unusually valuable. So, how much is a 1967 Washington quarter worth? There isn't one single answer. A normal circulated 1967 quarter generally carries a value based largely on its silver content and modest collector premium, rather than being a rare date coin. The exact value changes with the market price of silver. A better condition example can be worth more, and an exceptional certified coin can command a much larger premium. The important point is that 1967 is not a date you should ignore. If you find one, you should immediately recognize that it is from the 40% silver era. You should also remember that the coin has no mint mark, and that is completely normal. Now imagine finding one in an old family collection. Maybe it has been sitting in a box for 50 years. Maybe it came from an old coin jar, a collection passed down by a relative or an estate. The coin itself may not be extremely rare, but its history can make it fascinating. Think about how many hands that quarter may have passed through. It was made during a period of major change in American coinage. The United States was dealing with a coin shortage, silver prices were becoming a major concern, and the mint was experimenting with new compositions to reduce the dependence on silver. The 1967 Washington quarter is therefore more than just 25 cents. It is a small piece of the story of America's transition away from traditional silver coinage. And that is what makes coin collecting so exciting. You don't always need $1 million rarity to have an interesting coin. Sometimes the history, composition, age, and condition are enough to make a coin worth examining. So if you have a 1967 Washington quarter, don't throw it into the ordinary change pile just because it looks old and worn. Pick it up. Check the date. Confirm that it has no mint mark. Look at the edge. Inspect the surfaces. Check the condition. And most importantly, remember that it contains 40% silver. If you discover a particularly beautiful example, a dramatic mint error, or a coin that appears to be in exceptional condition, that is when it may be worth getting a professional opinion. And remember, never judge an old coin only by the biggest price you see online. Auction results, asking prices, coin grades, and actual market values can be very different. A realistic evaluation requires looking at the exact coin in your hand. So, could your 1967 Washington quarter make you rich? For most examples, probably not. But could it be worth significantly more than 25 cents? Absolutely, because of its silver content and potential collector premium. And could a rare error or exceptionally high-grade example be worth substantially more? Yes, that is where careful examination becomes important. This is why we always say here at Hardest Penny, don't spend it before you inspect it. That old quarter sitting in your drawer might not be a fortune, but could contain silver, history, and a story that has survived for more than half a century. So the next time you see a 1967 Washington quarter, take a closer look. Check every detail, protect the original surface, and never assume that an old coin is worthless just because it looks ordinary. Thanks for watching Hardest Penny. If you enjoy discovering the history, hidden value, silver content, errors, and fascinating details behind old American coins, keep following the channel. And always remember our golden rule. Before you spend an old coin, check the date, check the mint mark, check the condition, and check twice. Because sometimes the coin that looks ordinary is the one you should never have spent. Welcome back to Stop. Before you spend that old 1981 Washington quarter, take a second look at it, because a coin that appears to be nothing more than ordinary pocket change could become much more interesting when you understand its date, mint mark, condition, and possible mint-made errors. Welcome back to Hardest Penny, where we search through American coins to discover the details that collectors notice and ordinary people often miss. Today, we are looking at just one coin, the 1981 Washington quarter, and by the end of this video, you will know exactly what makes this quarter common, what can make it collectible, and what you should inspect before deciding that it is worth only 25 cents. 1981 Washington quarter. The 1981 Washington quarter was struck at the Denver Mint, and the small letter D near the base of Washington's neck identifies it as a Denver minted coin. In 1981, the Denver Mint produced approximately 575,722,833 Washington quarters. That is an enormous number. So the first important fact is that the normal 1981 quarter is not considered a rare coin simply because it is from 1981. Millions were released into circulation, and many survived. This is where many online coin videos can become confusing. You may hear dramatic claims that every 1981 quarter is worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. That is not the case. A normal circulated example is generally a common coin. The real story is more interesting. Condition and unusual mint characteristics can make certain examples much more desirable than an ordinary worn quarter. Let's begin with the basic specifications. The 1981 Washington quarter has a face value of 25 cents and uses a copper-nickel clad composition rather than the 90% silver composition used by Washington quarters from the earlier silver era. Its composition is approximately 91.67% copper and 8.33% nickel, with a standard weight of about 5.67 grams and a diameter of approximately 24.3 millimeters. The coin was designed by John Flanagan, whose Washington quarter design had already been in production for decades by 1981. Now turn your attention to the obverse. You will see the familiar portrait of George Washington facing left. Above his head is the word Liberty, while the inscription, "I in God we trust," appears in front of his face. At the bottom is the date 1981. Just behind Washington's neck, look carefully for the D mint mark. That tiny letter is important because it tells us the coin was produced at Denver rather than Philadelphia. And here's a useful tip for beginners. Don't judge a coin's value simply because its mint mark looks strange. A weak, filled, damaged, or worn mint mark does not automatically mean you have a rare variety. The appearance of a mint mark can change because of circulation, die wear, debris, or other production factors. Collectors want evidence of a genuine mint-made variety or error, not simply something that looks unusual. Now flip the coin over. The reverse features the American eagle with wings spread, surrounded by the inscriptions United States of America, e pluribus unum, and $quarter. This classic eagle reverse was used on Washington quarters for many years before the major redesigns that came later. When examining your 1981 quarter, inspect the eagle, lettering, rim, and overall strike carefully. One of the biggest reasons collectors pay attention to 1981 quarters is not because of the enormous mintage, but because high-grade examples can be much harder to find than the mintage number suggests. A coin can be common in general, but scarce in exceptional condition. Think about what happened after these quarters left the mint. They were put into bags, transported, counted, rolled, handled, spent, dropped, and circulated. All of that contact created scratches, nicks, dull surfaces, and other marks. So if you discover a 1981D quarter that looks almost untouched, that's when you should slow down. Look at Washington's cheek and jaw. These areas can reveal contact marks very easily. Check the fields around the portrait for scratches. Examine the lettering for sharpness. Then move to the reverse and inspect the eagle's feathers and the open fields. A coin with original luster, strong detail, and very few contact marks can be considerably more interesting to collectors than an ordinary circulated example. Some published value guides list the 1981D as essentially a face value coin in typical circulated grades, while uncirculated examples can bring a premium. One current guide, for example, lists an estimated value of around $7.29 or more for an uncirculated MS example, illustrating how strongly condition can affect the value of this otherwise common issue. Actual market value can vary significantly according to grade, eye appeal, certification, and demand. But now comes the part every coin hunter wants to hear about: errors. A genuine mint error can make an ordinary quarter much more interesting. When examining a 1981D, watch for obvious abnormalities such as a significant off-center strike, missing or improperly formed clad layers, major die-related abnormalities, or strong and verifiable doubling. However, be extremely careful here. Not every strange-looking coin is an error. For example, a coin with a damaged edge may have been damaged after leaving the mint. A flattened rim could come from machines or other forms of post-mint abuse. Scratches, discoloration, chemical exposure, and unusual toning can also happen after the coin enters circulation. These conditions may make a coin look dramatic, but they usually do not create the kind of premium collectors pay for genuine mint errors. The same warning applies to a filled-looking D mint mark. Some 1981D quarters show mint marks that appear partially filled or distorted. That can happen from die, wear, or debris, and collectors generally should not assume that every filled D represents a major rarity. Community discussions about similar 1981 quarters repeatedly emphasize that many such examples are simply normal wear or common die-related characteristics rather than valuable rarities. Another important point is cleaning. If you find a beautiful-looking 1981D quarter, do not polish it, scrub it, or use chemicals to make it shine. A shiny coin is not necessarily a valuable coin. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and reduce collector appeal. If you think you have something special, the safest approach is to handle the coin by its edges and preserve its existing surfaces. Now let's talk about the value question directly. If your 1981D quarter is heavily circulated, scratched, worn, and completely ordinary, you should not expect a huge fortune. In many cases, it remains a 25-cent coin. If it is in attractive, uncirculated condition, its value can move above face value. If it is an exceptionally high-grade example, the value can rise much further because top-quality coins from heavily produced issues can be surprisingly difficult to locate. One reported auction result cited for a high-grade 1981D reached several $100s, showing why condition matters so much at the upper end. But remember, an internet listing is not the same thing as a confirmed sale, and an asking price is not the same as market value. If somebody lists a 1981D quarter online for $10,000, that does not mean the coin is actually worth $10,000. Serious collectors look at comparable sales, grading, authentication, and the exact characteristics of the coin. Second, confirm the mint mark. Third, check the overall condition. Is the coin worn, or does it still have strong original luster? Fourth, inspect the surfaces under good lighting. Look for unusual doubling, major striking problems, missing metal, or other characteristics that appear to have happened during the minting process. Fifth, compare the coin with reliable numismatic references rather than relying on sensational claims. And finally, if you believe your coin has a significant error or is in exceptional condition, consider professional authentication and grading. A certified grade can provide an independent assessment and may make a high-quality coin easier to sell to serious collectors. The biggest lesson from the 1981 D Washington quarter is simple. Mintage alone does not determine value. More than 575 million were produced, making the ordinary example common. But within a huge population, condition rarities and genuine mint errors can still exist. So the next time you see a 1981 D quarter in a coin jar, an old collection, or your spare change, don't immediately throw it back into circulation. Pick it up, look at the date, find that tiny D, study the surfaces, check the strike. This is exactly why coin collecting is so fascinating. Sometimes the value isn't obvious at first glance. A small piece of metal can carry history, craftsmanship, production clues, and sometimes a surprising premium, all hidden in details that most people never notice. If you enjoyed this close look at the 1981 D Washington quarter, stay connected with Hardest Penny for more American coin discoveries, valuable dates, mint errors, unusual varieties, and the stories behind the coins that pass through our hands every day. And remember, before you spend an old coin, look twice, because the smallest detail can sometimes make the biggest difference.